Hello, welcome to our little shop. Today we have something really special for you. We have an early 70s Marshall Super Bass amplifier in for repair. It belongs to a old longtime friend customer of mine, and he brought it in to have me perk it up a little bit. It's feeling a little tired. I don't know what the age of the amp is yet, but I do know that it's older than a JMP that I had. This one still has the metal switches instead of the plastic switches on the toggles. And as Big Bob's Marshall Warehouse says, JMP is a great place to be. These are real Marshalls. These are the amps right after the Plexis. You know, even though it's not a Plexi, it's a very cool amp. Guitar players love these, even though it's a bass amp. And it pretty much is a tweed Bassman circuit with 4 EL34 output tubes. So we're talking about roughly a 100-watt Fender Bassman, done British style. Like I say, these are real Marshalls. My opinion is that the real Marshalls kind of ended after the very early JCM 800s. Yeah, I include them because I think they're cool. But anyway, these, like I say, are the real Marshalls. This is loud, in-your-face British attitude. This amp is all pretty much original. It has original filter caps and all that. It has had a home recover on the main part of the cabinet and a couple corners added. The feet's also been removed from it. So let's spin it around and take a look at the back of it. Yep, that's what they look like from the back. Looks like our fuse holders have been roughed up a little bit, but they are original. I'm pretty sure the impedance selector's been changed on it. This is not what I'm used to seeing on the JMPs. This looks like the later impedance selectors. At least it's not been butchered severely. I've seen some pretty horrible installations of those. But let's look here real close. See these 4 speaker output jacks? Can you imagine how loud this thing would actually be with 4 cabinets? British rock and roll as God intended it. So let's crack this open and get to it. Oh, children, look what I have found. We have a factory test date of August 31st, 1973. And that's really funny. Today's August 31st, 2021. I love irony. Okay, let's get to work on this. And as usual, per my typical procedure, I pulled the fuses on this amp. You notice I have a proper size screwdriver to actually fit the fuse holders. That's why they're torn up like this. People haven't bothered. You see. Anyway, the point is, again, people. There's an 8 amp fuse in a high tension fuse holder. That's supposed to be a 1 amp. If there had been anything serious happen to this amp, we'd be talking Marshall Flambe. However, they did actually have the 4 amp in the proper AC holder. Just saying, always check your fuses. Use the right sized ones. Okay, well, taking a look under the hood here, I've found some good and some bad stuff. First thing I want to point out to you, this is pretty much dead stock. Doesn't look like much has been going on in here. We've had some solder joints resoldered down here on the filter caps, but the caps have never been changed because you still have paint on some of the solder joints from the factory. All this is dead original. The bias capacitors are still the original ones. We've got the original mustard caps. Something else I want to point out here, they used the same boards in these amplifiers for the lead model and the base model. You can actually see down here in the corner where they verify that. This is one of the models that actually have the cathodes of the 2 preamp tubes tied together and share the same bias resistor and capacitor. That's what this big 330 microfarad cap is over here, and this little 820 ohm resistor for the bias for the preamp tubes. Something else here I actually want to point out to you guys. You notice there are no carbon composition resistors in this amplifier. To my knowledge, Marshall never used carbon comp resistors. Maybe back in the very, very early years, but pretty much most of the amps I've ever worked on, I never saw any carbon comps in it. Something else, just to talk about the quality going on here. One of my big things is checking screen resistors on the output tubes. I've already checked these. They all read between 1019 ohms and 1022 ohms. That means in all the years of this thing running, these 4 screen resistors are only off by like 3 ohms. We're going to be leaving them. We're not going to be changing a whole lot in this amp actually. We're going to do some filter caps. We're going to check these power supply resistors. What they have done here is they've taken 2 pairs of 50 microfarad capacitors and paralleled each capacitor to make it 100 microfarads. Then they seriesed the 2 100s to bring them back down to 50. And they've put these 56K resistors between them to keep the voltages split between the 2 stacks. The original amps a lot of times did not have that on both stacks. We have another one tucked in up underneath here, and as usual there's another one hidden back here under the circuit board. So we're going to take the circuit board loose, which means, you know, pulling all the pots and flipping this board backwards to replace these 2 capacitors. Yeah, I know, guys clip them off here and solder to them, but nope, not in this shop. Anyway, so that's going to have to be done. And yes, someone has changed the speaker selector back here. That's unfortunate. I tell people all the time, you know, the original ones with the caps that plug in are reliable. You just have to maintenance it. You can't be stupid with them. I've seen all kinds of stuff done to those things. I never had a minute's problem with mine. And frankly, in the late 70s when I was using it, I wasn't that savvy about the amp stuff. I was just another bonehead guitar player out there beating my stuff around. But anyway, that's what I see in here. Everything looks pretty cool. Other than the little things there, like I said, all I've seen's been done is the selector's been changed, a few solder joints down here. What's this? What is this? Oh, that looks like some splattered solder from when somebody's been in here before. Okay. No splices or anything here or anything. Alright. Something else I've noticed here is the power cord has been changed. This may have actually only had a 2 conductor cord on to start with. So someone's replaced it with a 3. But something I really don't like is they have actually connected the ground right down here to the cathode of one of the output tubes. So I believe that that's going to get moved. Since this is a steel chassis, I may just solder it right down here somewhere. It should be as close to where the AC comes in as possible. But I really don't like it soldered on the cathode, actually right on the pin of the tube socket. Just seems like a bad idea. So we're going to get some caps in this, get some new tubes in it, give it a good once over. This belongs to a good old long-time friend, customer of mine, and he actually asked me about whether he should buy an aftermarket replacement cabinet for it. He may get this one recovered. Let me check my stash of Marshall Tolex. We'll see. Anyway, we're going to get to work on this. I'll be back. So as I was taking this board loose, I ran into something funny. As I was taking this nut off back here, I bumped this capacitor and it just popped up. So apparently it's between the plates on the phase inverter, a little 47 picofarad capacitor. Now I'm sure it's been making and breaking connection there. So that can't be good. Something else I noticed here, we have another old Marshall. I say a lot of these older amps, they didn't do the screen resistors right on them either. So of our pair of output tubes here, this EL34 does not have a screen resistor. And then you have one going from it to the other one, so this one does have. So these should actually have a screen resistor on each tube. I say I've run into this a lot. So we've got our board all loose here as well. We've got the pots all loose. We can fold it back to get this capacitor down here, plus change the things we need to on this printed circuit board. There will be at least 3 capacitors changed and 1 resoldered on this. So here we go. Well, the plot thickens. And I'll catch you up here a little bit on what's going on. I made the comment earlier that I had never seen a whole lot of carbon composition resistors in these amplifiers before. Well, I found one. Over here, the bias resistor for the 2 preamp tubes was actually an 820 ohm carbon comp, and as usual it had drifted up over 1,000 ohms. so I changed it. Found a couple other bad solder joints here on a couple tube sockets. I've corrected the grid resistors here for the output tubes. The schematic does show 4 resistors, but this amp only had 2, and they were the wrong value. The schematic says again 5.6K, which is standard for Marshalls, and this had 2 1.5Ks in it. I'm going to have to clean up this impedance selector a little bit. It's a bit of a mess, and our feedback loop wire here is hanging exactly where I don't want it, so I'm going to move it around. See the other grid resistors here I've took care of. I have the ground for the 3-conductor AC cable disconnected. I removed it from the cathode over here of this tube, and we'll reconnect it later. But I have a lot here to do yet. I ought to change a few caps and fix things as I find it as I go. I also found underneath the board here this black lead that had been melted pretty badly. There's been some pretty sloppy work going in this amp at one time or another. A lot of burnt leads from having soldering iron shoved up against it. So I'm taking care of that kind of stuff as we go. So at the time you're caught up, we have our caps all taken care of. In fact, most of this amp is taken care of at this point, other than tweaking. I got to clean the pots, the jacks, probably the tube sockets, get a set of output tubes in and get it biased up. I'm sure we're going to find a couple of quirks we're going to have to fix along the way. But all in all, we're pretty much done here. All the heavy lifting's been taken care of. So I mentioned earlier that some of the early model amps like this did not have the voltage divider resistors on the first set of caps. Well, there's a reason for that. I've been asked several times about this, and here's the situation. Some of these amps use a bridge rectifier in the power supply. So what happens is the center tap of the power transformer right here is actually connected to the center of these 2 caps. In a lot of cases that is actually grounded, but in these particular cases it is soldered to the connection of the 2 cap stacks right in the center. Moving on, like I say, we've cleaned up some other stuff here. You can actually see where I've been. It's a little bit neater rat's nest. But anyway, cleaned up back here at the impedance selector. The feedback loop wire was actually connected to the wrong wire there too, so we corrected that. We've reconnected the AC cable, and we've decided to put a happy little solder joint that's going to live right down here for the ground for the AC. There, Zach, that comment was for you. Anyway, so there we are. Like I said, we've tidied things up a little bit. We're going to move on to getting the tubes in this and getting it biased up. Something else I'd like to mention here while we're talking about this capacitor thing. Marshall went through an awful lot of trouble to have 50 microfarad caps here. What they did, we've got, again, we have a dual 50 that's been paralleled, which makes it 100. Then they series that with another 100 that they've paralleled, which brings us back down to 50 again. Okay? So a lot of the older Marshalls actually only use one section of the 50 for the plate, another section of the 50 for the screen. However, in this amp we've now got a big old 50 here and a big old 50 here for the same thing. Now, the comment I want to make, For all you sludge metal bass players and guitar players that are drooling right now while you're watching this video, for you guys, I would highly recommend going to 100 microfarads and all these 4 capacitors right here. When you're done, that would give you 100 microfarad filtering here and here, like is common in the 800s and 900 amplifiers, which will tighten up the bottom end, which you're going to need, because when you down tune, these are not going to be able to develop enough power to keep your instrument in tune. It'd be woefully underfiltered. You're going to be drawing huge amounts of power trying to develop those big low notes. That ain't going to happen. So the point here I am trying to make is, unless you up this filtering, your low notes are going to sound like a license plate flapping on a dog at 3 a.m. Don't get too excited. There's not going to be a whole lot of a sound clip here. Just want to point a few things out to you. If you look at the volume controls in this amp, it's off. The only way to make it any more quiet is to turn the power off. I used to actually practice through my JMP a little bit like this. It's still quite audible. It's not really loud, but it's less annoying to other people. So I'm actually plugged into the bright channel, which does have a bright cap on it. But we're going to do a couple things here to show you what's going on. Like I say, that's volume off. That's on 2. Like I said, that's a bright channel. They're not as bright as the later ones. Let's switch it over here a second. Same deal, that's not as loud. You see how much darker the normal channel is. But for a British amp, you have to play British chords. That's 1. God, how did we play these things? Anyway. That's 4. I'm surprised things are starting to rattle around here yet. That's it. Just want to let you know, these things are loud. I'm only playing through a 212 cabinet, thank God. And it's actually blowing past my knees at this point. So, can't wait to see how bad this camera's distorted. So there you go. 100 watt, 1973 Super Bass amp. Used by a lot of guitar players, including Hendrix and a few others. I almost bet that the Rio Grande amps that ZZ Top used back there in the early days were actually modeled after these amps, because the hearsay is they were tweed Fender style amps in the head or rehoused Marshalls. Well, you know what? This is a tweed amp. Also saw on a very popular site the other day that there was this big elaborate video display of Jim Marshall had designed and built one of the world's greatest amplifiers without the aid of a computer or anything like that, or software. Well, I'll agree with that. He didn't. He stole it from Leo Fender. So anyway, I'm going to pack this thing up and get it ready for the owner. Again, you know, guys, I don't do a lot of demos because after hours and hours of fret work, my hands don't work. So between that and everything rattling in here, like I say, I'm surprised nothing has shaken off or rattled that bad. It used to be a game in here on the weekends till the pizza shop closed next door. We had a frozen pizza shop next door that every Friday, actually every Thursday, before they closed up for the weekend, they would stack a huge pile of folded pizza boxes on the table here on the other side of the wall from this shop. So it used to actually be a game and kind of a joke with me that I would leave pretty much on Friday afternoons after the guys have been trying their amps out and picking things up, and see how many pizza boxes were on the floor. So kind of caught me off guard the first time I saw it, but then I kind of got amusement out of it. So anyway, so until next time, play nice. I'll see you later.